The golden California sun was setting over the Pacific Coast Highway, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Amanda Lee smiled as she guided her brand-new Mercedes-AMG GT around a sweeping curve, enjoying the gentle purr of the engine. She had just closed a major real estate deal, and this car was her reward for years of hard work and dedication. The silver vehicle gleamed in the fading sunlight, drawing admiring glances from other drivers. At 32, Amanda had built her reputation as one of the top-performing real estate agents in the area. Starting from humble beginnings, she had worked her way up, sometimes pulling 16-hour days to make her dreams come true. The peaceful drive took an unexpected turn when blue and red lights began flashing in her rearview mirror. Amanda checked her speed. She had been careful to stay within the limit. Confused but maintaining her composure, she signaled and pulled over to the shoulder, making sure to stop in a well-lit area where other cars could see them. Following proper protocol, she turned off the engine, placed her hands on the steering wheel, and waited. Through her side mirror, she watched as a police officer approached, his hand resting near his belt. Her heart began to race, but she took deep breaths to stay calm. License and registration, the officer demanded, his flashlight beam sweeping across the car's interior. His tone was curt, almost suspicious. Amanda noticed a second patrol car pulling up behind the first one. "Of course, officer," she replied politely, slowly reaching for her purse. "May I ask what seems to be the problem?" The officer's expression remained stern as he examined her documents. "We've had reports of stolen luxury vehicles in the area. This car's registration is raising some red flags in our system." Amanda's confusion deepened. She had all the paperwork from the dealership, completed just last week. "Officer, there must be some mistake. I purchased this car from Beverly Hills Motors 7 days ago. I have all the documentation right here in the glove compartment." As she reached to get the papers, the officer's posture stiffened. "Ma'am, please keep your hands where I can see them." 2 more officers from the second patrol car were now approaching. The situation was becoming increasingly tense. Through the windows of passing cars, Amanda could see people slowing down to watch. What should have been a moment of pride, driving her dream car after years of saving and hard work, was turning into something entirely different. "Officer, I don't understand," Amanda said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite her rising anxiety. "I can prove this is my car. I can call the dealership right now. They're still open. Or my bank can confirm the transaction." The lead officer spoke into his radio while his colleagues positioned themselves around her vehicle. Amanda could hear fragments of their conversation: suspicious registration, possible theft, requesting verification. She knew she needed help. While the officers discussed among themselves, she carefully reached for her phone. Her husband, a respected criminal defense attorney, was just finishing up a case at the courthouse 15 minutes away. One text from her could change everything. The sky had darkened considerably now, and the patrol cars' flashing lights created an eerie light show on the highway. More vehicles were slowing down to observe the scene, and Amanda could feel the weight of strangers' stares. She had worked too hard and come too far to let someone else's assumptions destroy what she had built. With steady fingers, she began typing a message to her husband, knowing that sometimes justice needs a little help arriving. The officers were still running her information, unaware that their routine traffic stop was about to take an unexpected turn. Amanda took a deep breath as she pulled out her business card holder, carefully selecting one that showed her role as Senior Real Estate Associate at Pacific Coast Properties. The leather portfolio in her passenger seat contained closing documents from today's multi-million-dollar deal. But somehow, none of that seemed to matter right now. "Officer, I understand your concerns," she said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I'm a real estate agent in the area. This car was purchased with my commission from recent sales. I can show you all the documentation." Her voice remained steady, drawing from years of handling tough negotiations and difficult clients. The lead officer studied her business card under his flashlight, his expression unchanged. "Ma'am, we've seen fake business cards before. We have reports of sophisticated theft rings using professional-looking credentials." He handed the card back, dismissing it as easily as he had dismissed her registration papers. Through her side mirror, Amanda noticed more curious onlookers slowing down. Some had even pulled over on the opposite shoulder, their phone cameras glinting in the darkness. What started as a routine traffic stop was quickly becoming a spectacle, and she felt her face grow warm with a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. "I've been living and working in this community for 8 years," she explained, reaching slowly for her phone. "I can call my broker right now. Or better yet, I can show you my real estate license and recent sales records." Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up her digital credentials. One of the backup officers circled her car, shining his flashlight over the pristine paint job and custom wheels. "This model goes for what? About $140,000. He called out to his colleague. "That's a lot of commissions." His tone carried an unmistakable hint of disbelief. Amanda felt a familiar knot in her stomach, one she'd experienced many times throughout her career when people underestimated her or questioned her success. She'd worked her way up from answering phones at a small real estate office to becoming one of the top producing agents in Southern California. Each victory had been earned through persistence, late nights, and an unwavering belief in herself. Actually, she corrected him professionally, this model was $165,000 with the custom features. And yes, I earned every penny through my work. She pulled up her recent sales history on her phone, showing a string of high-end property transactions. "Here are my verified listings and closings for the past 6 months." The officers exchanged glances, their skepticism evident in the beam of the patrol car headlights. The lead officer spoke into his radio again, requesting additional verification of her credentials. Amanda could hear snippets of the conversation. Mentions of possible forgery, vehicle theft patterns, and the need for further investigation. Meanwhile, her text to her husband remained unanswered. She knew he was likely still wrapping up his court case, but each passing minute felt like an eternity. The growing crowd of onlookers only added to her discomfort, their presence a reminder of how quickly situations like this could spiral out of control. A cool breeze from the ocean carried the salt air across the highway, rustling through the palm trees that lined the road. Amanda watched as another patrol car pulled up, its lights adding to the dramatic scene. She thought about all the times she'd driven past similar traffic stops, never imagining she'd find herself in this position. Her phone suddenly vibrated, not a response from her husband, but a notification about tomorrow's open house. The irony wasn't lost on her. Less than 12 hours from now, she was supposed to be showing a $3.8 million beachfront property to potential buyers. Instead, she sat here, watching her professional reputation being questioned by officers who couldn't seem to reconcile her success with their preconceptions. As she waited for the officers to complete their verification process, Amanda began mentally preparing for what might come next. She knew her rights, but she also knew that sometimes proving you're in the right can be a complicated journey. The night was still young, and this situation was far from over. The situation took a more serious turn when the lead officer stepped back to his patrol car, leaving Amanda alone with her thoughts for a moment. Through her mirrors, she could see the officers huddled in discussion, occasionally glancing in her direction. Their body language suggested they weren't convinced by her explanations. "Step out of the vehicle, please," the lead officer called out as he returned, his flashlight beam steady on her door. Amanda's stomach dropped, but she kept her composure, remembering everything her husband had taught her about encounters with law enforcement. "May I ask why I need to step out of my car?" she inquired politely, her hands still visible on the steering wheel. The question was met with a firmer tone from the officer. "Ma'am, we need to verify some information, and it's department policy to have the driver step out during an investigation." His hand rested casually on his belt as he spoke, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. The cool coastal air hit Amanda's face as she carefully opened her door. Her heels clicked against the asphalt as she stepped out, grateful she'd worn her formal business suit today. Standing tall despite her nervousness, she faced the officers with the same professional demeanor she used in high-stakes property negotiations. "We're going to need to impound this vehicle pending further investigation," one of the backup officers announced, already reaching for his radio to call for a tow truck. Amanda felt her chest tighten, but years of handling difficult situations helped her maintain her composure. "Officers, I must respectfully disagree with this course of action," she stated firmly. "I have provided you with my license, registration, proof of purchase, and business credentials. I'm happy to cooperate further, but impounding my legally purchased vehicle seems excessive." More patrol cars had arrived, their lights creating a disco-like effect on the darkened highway. The growing crowd of onlookers had started recording with their phones, some whispering among themselves. Amanda could only imagine what tomorrow's social media would look like. One of the female officers approached, her expression slightly more sympathetic than her colleagues. "Listen, if this is really your car, you can sort it out at the station. These things happen sometimes with high-end vehicles." Amanda stood her ground, though her heart was racing. "I understand you're doing your job, but this is a mistake that could seriously impact my business. I have clients expecting me tomorrow, and this car contains sensitive real estate documents that I'm legally responsible for protecting." She could see the tow truck's yellow lights approaching in the distance, and desperation began to creep in. Her phone remained frustratingly silent. No response from her husband yet. The weight of the situation pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy coat. "If you could just verify with the dealership," Amanda began, but was cut off by the lead officer. "The dealership is closed now, ma'am. We'll sort this out through proper channels." He was already filling out impound paperwork, his pen scratching against the citation pad. The night had grown colder, and Amanda wrapped her arms around herself, watching as the tow truck pulled up behind a line of patrol cars. The driver jumped out, already swinging his chains and hooks, as if her Mercedes was just another job on his list. She thought about her journey, the countless open houses, the late-night client calls, the years of building her reputation in a competitive market. Now, standing on the side of the highway, watching strangers prepare to take away the symbol of her success, she felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Just then, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it, hoping it was finally the message she'd been waiting for. The officers watched her closely as she checked the screen, unaware that their routine traffic stop was about to take an unexpected turn. Amanda's heart leaped as she read the message from her husband. "Just finished in court. On my way. Don't let them move the car. 15 minutes." Relief washed over her like a warm wave, but she kept her expression neutral, not wanting to show her cards just yet. The tow truck driver was already positioning his vehicle, the backup beeping sound adding to the chaos of flashing lights and passing traffic. Amanda watched as he walked around her Mercedes, sizing it up like a predator circling its prey. The fine leather seats and custom dashboard that had brought her such joy just hours ago now felt painfully far away. "Ma'am, we'll need you to sign these impound forms," the lead officer said, holding out a clipboard. "You can collect your personal belongings before we take the vehicle." Amanda straightened her suit jacket, channeling the confidence she used in million-dollar property negotiations. "Officer, I appreciate your diligence, but I'm still waiting for an important phone call that will verify my ownership. Could we hold off for just a few more minutes?" The officer's patience was wearing thin. "We've already spent enough time here. Either sign the forms, or we'll have to note your refusal to cooperate." His tone carried a clear warning. The growing crowd of onlookers has started to murmur louder, their phones still recording every moment. Some had even gone live on social media, narrating what they were witnessing. Amanda could hear fragments of their commentary carried by the cool night breeze. She glanced at her watch. 10 minutes had passed since her husband's message. Each second felt like an eternity as she watched the tow truck driver attach cables to her car. The female officer from earlier approached again, this time with a plastic evidence bag. "You'll need to place your keys in here," she said, her voice professional but not unkind. "Any valuable items should be removed now." Amanda's mind raced through her options. The portfolio in her passenger seat contained sensitive client information. Mortgage documents, bank statements, and contract drafts that she was legally obligated to protect. She couldn't just leave them in an impound lot. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, the distinct sound of squealing tires caught everyone's attention. A black BMW was approaching rapidly, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The vehicle came to a precise stop behind a last patrol car, and Amanda's shoulders relaxed slightly. She would have recognized that dramatic entrance anywhere. The officers turned toward the new arrival, hands instinctively moving toward their belts. The BMW's door opened, and out stepped a figure in a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen its share of courtrooms. "Officers, my name is David Lee," he announced in a clear, authoritative voice that carried across the scene. "I'm Mrs. Lee's husband and her attorney. Before we proceed with any vehicle impoundment, I believe we need to discuss several constitutional issues at play here." The lead officer's posture shifted slightly. "Sir, this is an ongoing investigation. We have reason to believe this vehicle may be stolen." David approached with measured steps, his courthouse confidence on full display. "And I have reason to believe this stop has extended well beyond reasonable suspicion into the territory of constitutional violations. I just got out of Judge Harrison's courtroom, and I'm sure he'd be very interested in reviewing the body-cam footage of this encounter." Amanda watched as the dynamics of the situation began to shift. The mention of the well-known judge's name had created a subtle but noticeable change in the officer's demeanor. Her husband's arrival had transformed the energy from one of interrogation to one of professional legal discourse. The crowd of onlookers had grown even larger, sensing that the story was about to take an interesting turn. The tow truck driver had paused his work, waiting for new instructions as the situation evolved before his eyes. In the distance, the waves crashed against the shoreline, a reminder that sometimes the tide can turn when you least expect it. David's presence had brought an immediate change to the atmosphere, like a shift in air pressure before a storm. He placed his briefcase on the hood of the patrol car and began pulling out documents with practiced efficiency. "First," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years in the courtroom, "I have here the original bill of sale from Beverly Hills Motors, dated exactly 1 week ago." He held up a crisp document that gleamed under the patrol car's lights. "You'll notice it's printed on their proprietary watermarked paper, something that would be exceptionally difficult to forge." The lead officer accepted the document, examining it with his flashlight. His colleagues gathered closer, their earlier certainty beginning to waver. The tow truck driver had stopped working entirely, sensing the shifting tide of the situation. Additionally, David continued, pulling out another folder. "Here are the bank transfer records showing the source of funds. My wife's commission from the sale of 3 luxury properties last month." He laid out the documents one by one, building his case like he'd done countless times before. "You'll note these transactions were all properly reported and taxed." Amanda watched her husband work, admiring how he maintained absolute professionalism while systematically dismantling the officer's assumptions. The growing crowd of onlookers had fallen silent, captivated by the scene unfolding before them. "Now," David said, his tone becoming more pointed, "let's discuss the questionable aspects of this stop. You've detained my wife for over 40 minutes based on what you called suspicious registration details. However, a simple check with the DMV database would have confirmed the vehicle's legitimate registration." The lead officer shifted his weight uncomfortably. "We have protocols to follow when dealing with potential luxury car theft rings." "Ah, yes, protocols," David nodded, reaching for another document. I'm quite familiar with department protocols, having defended the department in civil cases before. Would you mind showing me where in the protocol it suggests extending a traffic stop for this duration without probable cause? The female officer, who had been more sympathetic earlier, stepped forward. Sir, we were just trying to be thorough. Thorough is good, David agreed, his tone softening slightly. But thorough doesn't mean we abandon constitutional protections. For instance, did anyone here run the VIN number through the national database? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. Because I did, on my way over. Would you like to see the results? The night air had grown colder, but nobody seemed to notice. The crowd of onlookers had grown even larger, some people now talking quietly about similar experiences they'd had or witnessed. The patrol car's flashing lights continued their rhythmic dance across the scene, illuminating faces that showed a mix of emotions. Furthermore, David continued, opening his briefcase again, I have here recent photographs from the dealership showing my wife taking delivery of this exact vehicle. Note the matching VIN number, color, and custom specifications. He laid these out carefully on the patrol car's hood. I also took the liberty of calling Judge Harrison's clerk on my way here. She's waiting by the phone if we need an emergency hearing regarding this detention. The mention of the judge's clerk sent a visible ripple through the group of officers. They huddled together, speaking in low voices while occasionally glancing at the documents spread out before them. The lead officer's earlier confidence had been replaced with something that looked remarkably like concern. Amanda caught her husband's eye and saw the slight nod he gave her, his courtroom signal that things were going their way. She remained poised, knowing that in situations like these, maintaining dignity was just as important as being right. The tow truck driver had retreated to his vehicle, sensing that his services might no longer be needed. The onlookers' phone cameras were still recording, capturing what had become an impromptu lesson in civil rights and proper police procedure. The lead officer cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the scene. After reviewing the additional documentation, he began, choosing his words carefully. We believe we can resolve this situation without impounding the vehicle. David maintained his professional demeanor, though a hint of satisfaction flickered in his eyes. I appreciate your willingness to reconsider, he said, gathering his documents with practiced precision. Though we should discuss the broader implications of tonight's events. The crowd of onlookers had grown even larger, their phones still recording every moment. Some were live streaming, providing running commentary about how quickly things had changed since the attorney's arrival. The flashing lights from the patrol cars painted everything in alternating red and blue, creating an almost theatrical atmosphere. My primary concern, David continued, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby, is not just about tonight. It's about preventing similar situations in the future. He pulled out a small notebook, jotting down badge numbers and patrol car identifiers with deliberate care. The female officer stepped forward again, this time with a different energy. Sir, we can arrange a meeting with our supervisor to discuss your concerns. Her tone suggested she understood the gravity of what had almost happened. Amanda watched as the tow truck driver began packing up his equipment, his services no longer needed. The night air had grown cooler, but she felt warmer now, stronger. The portfolio of real estate documents in her car was safe, her appointments for tomorrow still intact. I think that would be an excellent start, David replied, pulling out his business card. I'd also like to review your department's protocols regarding vehicle stops and verification procedures. He handed cards to each officer present, his movements calm and precise. The lead officer had begun instructing his colleagues to pack up their equipment. The circus of flashing lights began to diminish as patrol cars pulled away one by one. The crowd started to thin, though many stayed to watch the final moments of this unexpected drama. Mrs. Lee, the lead officer, turned to Amanda, his tone notably more respectful. You're free to go. We apologize for any inconvenience. The word inconvenience seemed inadequate for what had transpired, but Amanda simply nodded gracefully. David placed a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. "We'll be following up through proper channels," he assured the remaining officers. "I trust you'll preserve all body cam footage and radio communications from tonight's incident." The officers nodded, knowing this request was more than just a courtesy. Their earlier confidence had been replaced by professional courtesy tinged with concern about potential consequences. Amanda finally moved toward her car, her heels clicking against the asphalt. The Mercedes gleamed under the streetlights, untouched by the tow truck's chains. As she opened the door, she caught fragments of conversation from the dispersing crowd. Discussions about knowing your rights, the importance of documentation, and having someone in your corner who understands the law. "One more thing," David called out to the departing officers, his voice carrying the weight of years of legal experience. "I think we all understand that my wife's experience tonight raises some serious questions about departmental training and potential bias in enforcement procedures. I'll be expecting a call from your department's legal team tomorrow." The remaining onlookers began sharing their recorded videos on social media, ensuring that this incident wouldn't simply disappear into the night. Some approached Amanda and David, sharing their own similar experiences or expressing support. As the last patrol car pulled away, the highway returned to its normal rhythm of passing traffic and ocean breezes. Amanda sat in her car, hands on the steering wheel, taking a moment to process everything that had happened. Her husband's BMW was parked protectively behind her, its presence a reminder that sometimes justice needs a little help to prevail. 2 weeks after the highway incident, Amanda sat in her home office, scrolling through dozens of messages from people who had seen the viral videos of that night. The footage, captured by numerous bystanders, had sparked a citywide conversation about police procedures and assumptions. The morning after the incident, local news channels had picked up the story. Security camera footage from nearby businesses had provided additional angles, showing the entire sequence of events in clear detail. The sight of a successful real estate agent being questioned about her own car had struck a chord with many viewers. "Your story helped me find my voice," read one message from a young business owner. "I went through something similar last year, but didn't know how to stand up for myself." Amanda had been receiving messages like this daily, each one reminding her that what happened that night was bigger than just her experience. David had kept his word about following up through proper channels. The department's legal team had reached out the very next day, eager to discuss the incident. The meeting in the chief's office had been productive, not just about that night, but about implementing changes in training and procedures. "We need to do better," the police chief had admitted during their meeting. "Your case has highlighted some serious gaps in our training." The department had agreed to revise its protocols for vehicle stops and implement new bias awareness programs. It wasn't just about policy changes, it was about changing mindsets. Amanda's real estate business had actually grown stronger through the experience. Clients appreciated her grace under pressure and her willingness to stand up for what was right. The luxury car that had drawn such suspicion now served as a symbol of perseverance and success earned through hard work. She took a sip of her morning coffee, remembering how different things might have been without proper documentation and legal support. The incident had inspired her to start a monthly workshop at her real estate office, teaching new agents about the importance of keeping proper records and knowing their rights. "The best defense is being prepared," she told her colleagues during these sessions. She shared copies of the documentation system she and David had developed. Everything from purchase receipts to banking records, organized and readily accessible. The local business community had rallied around her story. Other successful professionals shared similar experiences, leading to the formation of a support network. They began organizing seminars featuring legal experts who could educate people about their rights and proper documentation. David's law firm had seen changes too. They'd started offering pro bono consultations for similar cases, helping people who might not have had access to immediate legal representation. "Sometimes," he often said, "just knowing your rights isn't enough. You need to know how to assert them properly. The videos from that night had become teaching materials in local law enforcement training sessions. Officers were now being taught to look beyond initial assumptions and follow proper verification procedures. The female officer, who had shown empathy during the incident, had become an advocate for change within the department. Back in her office, Amanda opened her laptop to prepare for the day's appointments. Her calendar was full, 3 luxury property showings, and a meeting with new clients. The Mercedes keys sat on her desk, catching the morning sunlight. They were more than just car keys now. They were a reminder that success comes with responsibility. Her phone buzzed with a message from a local community organization, asking if she would share her story at their upcoming event. These speaking requests had become common, but Amanda chose them carefully, wanting to focus on constructive change rather than dwelling on the negative. Outside her window, the Pacific Coast Highway stretched into the distance, the same road where everything had happened. But now, it looked different to her. Not just a route to her next property showing, but a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys aren't about reaching a destination, but about changing the path for those who would follow.